Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to CGAO's monthly webinar series for April 2025, sponsored by Mapped Out GIS Solutions. My name is Gabe Durrett. I'll be your moderator for this session. Today's presentation is on leveraging drones in your GIS team with Audrey Cleaver and Treavon Clark from Ohio State University. They are both GIS analysts and drone pilots for the Facilities Information Technology Services, also known as FITS at OSU. Please welcome Audrey and Treavon. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Audrey, do you want to get us started?
Yeah, so we are going to be showing you guys all about what we do at OSU with our drones, how we get requests, how we, what kind of requests that we do, what kind of processing that we do, and then Treavon will talk about how he's putting that on ArcGIS Online. So I wanted to give you guys a little bit of information about FITS. So we are Facilities Information and Technology Services. So on the left is from our webpage. That's the GIS page that shows campus map, historic map, GIS maps, pretty much all of the maps that we create. And then on the right is our the rest of our group and how we are kind of related to data services, which is our space information group, and then architectural services, which handles a lot of our BIM and all of our other building models. Here's the GIS team. So we are headed by Larissa Kruger, who's our enterprise GIS manager. And then Aaron and Treavon are both of our analysts, and then I'm the technician on the team. So I do most of the data backend. So I do a lot of maintenance and creation of data, but I also manage our students. So yeah, so a lot of what we do is multiple data collection methods. We do a lot of field verification in the summer. We do any integration from projects that are on campus. If we do buildings on campus, new parking lot, more trees, anything like that. We do multiple kinds of data collection, field maps, integrations, drone work, stuff like that. And we disseminate that to any user that's on campus, a lot of outside users as well, AE companies that are working on projects here. And then here's just a little bit of campus by the number. So we have over 1,300 buildings and structures on campus that are totaling about 1.141 million square feet in space. And then we have about 16,000 acres of landscape on campus. That's including all of our regionals as well.
Yeah, so what that really boils down to is that we have a lot of stuff that we have to maintain, and we have a lot of different data methods on getting deliverables sent to us, whether it be CAD or something, but focusing on imagery. I wanted to give a little bit of a shout out here to Aaron on our team, because he was there since sort of the beginning of our drone team, and sort of those workflows. And then just a little bit more background on Audrey and I. We have I was an intern in our team, and then and she has also been like a VO, and we've worked our way up from doing just the VO work as a visual observer and like carrying equipment and just like being there for safety, and now planning and operating with all the drones. So you're just taking it and sort of like running with it and really maturing it into what we're going to show you. But there's some general industry knowledge that it's very likely that you'll be asked once you have a drone, or if you already have a drone, you're probably asked a lot already about, what can you do with this stuff? What's this industry really about? And there's a lot of uncertainty, and there is recreational rules versus commercial rules. And we're going to be talking all about the commercial, but those are sometimes a little bit more clear than the recreational ones. So talking about like the person, place, and thing here. The most important is you're probably going to hear a little bit about the remote pilot and command. So that is, at the end of the day, the person that's ultimately responsible for everything. They might not be physically holding the controller in their hands because they might be doing training, or they might need to deal with something else. But usually, if you're doing something, it's likely that you need to be able to wear any of the hats at any given time, and everybody that is with you in if you have a field crew need to understand that at the end of the day, in a snap decision, you have to be in charge. And it's, if I say I need the controller back, they have to give it back, because you might have noticed something, or something might feel off or seem odd. But we've never had any crashes or any issues, because we sort of follow the letter of the law as best we can, and we're actually stricter on ourselves in the policies when it comes to drones. So we designate a remote piloting command for every single flight. Even if there's really only one person out there, then it's a de facto thing, but we try to have at least 2 people go out whenever we're doing anything with a drone, because the last thing that you want to hear is some headline about how a drone fell and caused some damage or hurt somebody. And that would, be very, very bad. So you might hear RPIC or remote piloting command sometimes in this presentation, or just in the industry. Everybody in our team, and usually you are required to have a Part 107. It's the most common certification, and think of it like a commercial driver's license. But for drones. If you want to use drones in your work or make any money, or if it's just part of your job description, it's very, very likely that you are going to be required to have this. It's like a 60-ish question, multiple choice test, and it's really not that ridiculous to get just a little bit of training. And you actually don't have to ever fly a drone before you do it. So you could see if you get this certification before you actually decide to deal with procurement of any equipment. And these tests are usually done at standard testing centers around the state. I know that there's a couple different locations in Columbus, and I'm sure there's plenty all over the place. So those are sort of the FAA requirements, but there's sometimes, depending on the type of equipment that you get, it's very likely that you're going to need case-by-case training or field manuals on your own equipment, because everything's going to function a little bit differently depending on what you procure. So that's sort of the people. Now, for the Columbus campus, we fly this twice a year, and we fly one regional every single summer to sort of keep some imagery up to date for as much as we can, to supplement all of the other free imagery that we're receiving, or provided from other sources. So for the Columbus campus, this is the most complicated and takes about a week of actual flights, but there is airspace regulations, and there are both physical and more abstract concepts that can be obstacles to planning your flight operations. So just to list all kinds of stuff here, we have to deal with cranes, whether it be the New Med Center that had 3 cranes all at once above it, or there could just be a very temporary crane that's moving some heavy equipment for a week that we were never told about, and we just have to sort of canvass everything across the campus before we do anything. And then every day we have to double check right before we take off for that day's flights that there's no new cranes that just came out of nowhere. The antenna towers, we know where they are. They don't really pop up, but those are very well known. And their guide cables are also a big obstacle to deal with. Usually, with airspace, we are in unclassified airspace, and there is a small section of the Columbus campus in the northwest corner that is in the airspace of the OSU airport, in between Dublin and Hilliard over there. And it's you do have to ask for permission to fly in that airspace after a certain height. So that 100 is sort of where you're good with pre-approval, usually automated without any additional information. And then anything above 100, you're going to have to ask for. There is a hard cap on everything at 400 feet. You cannot fly over 400 feet. Drones have to stay in their own lane, and anything over 400 feet is from the top of a standing structure. So you have this sort of not very clear-cut airspace that you can really operate in, but helicopter landing sites are a huge issue for us. So when you see a helicopter, you're really going to be considering like that could just like come out of nowhere. You got to be very careful and consider bringing your drones back to home, even if it is 500 feet above and very deconflicted from where you're actually flying. If there's a helicopter landing pad in the area, then they could be in the middle of landing and they're going to come down into that 400-foot airspace. So you have to completely just be ready to wait 40 minutes to an hour and say, well, there's a helicopter on that landing pad. We don't know when it's going to take off. So you might end up having really efficient and really inefficient flight days. It's something I never would have considered until I was sort of working with drones in an area that had major helicopter activity. Pretty much anything inside of the 270 loop in Columbus is very heavy in terms of helicopter traffic. But being in the approach path or in between these airports is also somewhat of a challenge. But we're lucky that the entire campus is in classified airspace. So those are both some of the physical and more abstract sort of airspace restrictions. But I do want to mention weather is sort of a massive issue. Each drone is rated for different weather conditions, and the vast majority need very low wind and little to preferably no precipitation for almost all equipment that is going to be sort of at the like commercial grade for us. And you're not allowed to fly over any major roadways. So 315 sort of cuts campus in half for the Columbus campus. And there's some very major roadways at other campuses too that we have to consider. So this is a massive challenge where you can't just say go in one direction and just do everything in this shape. This is the overall flight path for that red insert, but there are a dozen smaller bits and pieces that need to be accomplished because line of sight is a huge one. You can't see the drone from one end of campus to the other due to buildings, trees. There's also just visibility limitations after a certain point that you have to be aware of for yourself. So those are some of the things that we deal with. Now, the last thing that I'll leave you with in terms of industry knowledge or sort of just getting the lay of the land here, drones can do a lot more than you may realize, but 90% of, I mean, the number is very arbitrary, but 90-ish% of the uses are probably going to be, there's a camera on the drone. What can I do with the camera on the drone? So real estate marketing, TV filming, movies, there are, police drones. There are, of course, we're talking about mapping today, but there are other uses for a drone. And it's very common for local government to consider getting one for the sake of police or for some auditing or mapping. So just be aware that drones using cameras, that's one thing. I found that there's a lot of really niche companies doing some very unique things, though, with drones that don't really get as much attention. Deliveries is probably the most common of those in that category, where they're not using a camera necessarily, and they're just moving a package or delivering medical necessities to remote areas. But firefighting drones exist. They drop these little like napalm balls and backburn fires so that the firefighter doesn't have to go physically do it. And then there's window cleaning, and there's, what else? There's spraying for crop drones. There's some sort of research projects out there that use sort of fume detection systems. So if it's a tool that you can use, you can probably attach it to a drone and use it. And it's just a different extension and a different way to use a tool. So most of the use cases are going to be in mapping, whether it be a RGB sensor, a LiDAR sensor, a hyperspectral, or something like that. But some sort of camera equipment is where most of the uses are, but not all. And we are going to show you sort of where that goes from here. what we use the actual cameras for.
So now we're going to get into some of the OSU flight operations. So this is from any of the flight requests that we get on campus, as well as our normal scheduled campus-wide imagery and regional visits like Treavon mentioned. So here is our OSU drone flight request form that we have to fill out every time that we want to get a flight approved that is on the Columbus campus. So this is a very in-depth process that we've worked out with the police department and the Department of Public Safety. So we have to fill out this pretty in-depth form, basically giving any detail possible about the drone flight. Is it federally funded? Where is it exactly? Is it going to be in a student life area where there's residence halls? Is it going to be on the Waterman Farm lab area where they have some flight restrictions, but they want to be aware of, but they just pretty much anything that is about the drone and about the flight, we put into this form. So this form also has the web map that shows the areas of interest for student life and CFAS, so the student or the College of Ag that we have down here. And then once that gets sent through, that goes through an approval process where it gets sent to the relevant parties. So it either goes straight through the Department of Public Safety, or it'll go through CFAS or Student Life. And then as soon as that's approved, it gets sent through a DocuSign process where it gets sent to the person, the requester. And once you sign it, it will get sent to the Department of Public Safety approver. And then they will send you the approval flight or the flight approval number and give you instructions on who to call at the Columbus Police Department dispatch for campus. And then you'll work with dispatch to let them know, like, when you're taking off, how long you expect to be, exactly where you are, so that when you're flying over athletics, you don't get the police called on you like we have in the past over the summer when they thought that we were Michigan flying over their practice. So now we're going to talk about some of the drones that we use. We have 4 drones that we have access to. So our favorite is the Wingtra. This is a fixed wing. It's that orange drone in the background. So that is the drone that we we utilize the most when we were doing our campus-wide flights. We also use this when we were doing regional imagery during the summer. And then we have 3 drones, 3 quad rotor drones that we have access to and use for any of our kind of like day-to-day flights, like construction inspections or marketing, or just like a small area on campus that is kind of awkward to get to. The Wingtra has a lot of setup a little bit required because it has a base station that it uses to collect really accurate coordinate or location data. And then the 2 quad rotors that we use the most are the Autel Evo Max 4T, which is just a really small drone, and the DJI Matrice, which is in the second picture that we have there. And then the Alta X we have used, but not as frequently. We have a hyperspectral and LiDAR sensor for that drone, so it is kind of a big drone, and it has a lot of setup required, usually about 20 to 25 minutes just of setup before it has any flight time. So that one is a little bit more of a very specific use case. So some of our typical flight requests that we have on campus, a lot of them are marketing, and these are usually like photos and videos of us zooming in on a building. So the bottom building is one of our marketing photos that we've used for the Blackwell. And there are other pictures where we take it from the other side of the Blackwell that shows the stadium because it's on the catty corner from the Blackwell. The top is an infrared picture that we just took of a building, GIS lab on the middle of campus. And they wanted to see some of the building envelope to make sure that it wasn't damaged. And that is also part of our construction inspections. So sometimes when we're doing construction inspections, we are asked to take multiple over several weeks so they can see like a time lapse of the construction as it's going on, or they just want to see like in the middle of the project, like how is it going. Another one of the flight requests that we do, especially when we go to regional campuses, are 360 photos. They're not very easy to show in like a static view because you can drag it around and see areas, but we do tend to take 360 photos of each of the buildings on our regional campuses. So here is our fixed wing Wingtra. This is the drone that we use for our biannual flights. So we typically will do this in the summer break, always before the students come back. And this usually takes about a week, weather depending. We have about 12 flights that we have to conduct across campus. And we also will try and do this around December, right after finals. So somewhere in winter break between finals and Christmas. We try and get it done just because holidays kind of mess with the schedule. But we're really trying to avoid when students are on campus because you don't want the drone to like somehow fall out of the sky and hit someone. And there's usually a lot less foot traffic on campus, so getting around is a lot easier with the drone. And this is a video of the drone taking off. This was when we did a flight for the OSU airport. The airport was closed for a day for a 5K, and so they invited us out to fly the entire airport with the College of Engineering. They also had another drone flying at the same time. So now I'm going to talk about how, when we're using the Wingtra imagery, we're moving it from the drone to site scan, which is how we process the imagery, to our TIFFs that we can put online. So when we're in the site scan website, we can upload all of our images to folders and projects so that we can merge them together in either an area that's like the athletics district for one mission, or West Campus or Waterman, something like that, so that we can process them all together, and instead of having 16 different flights that we have to clean up. But we also sometimes we'll merge them together, so like all of West Campus will include like Carmenton and Waterman, so that's all of West Campus in one flight. Or sometimes we'll do all of the middle part of campus, so that's athletics and then the vet med area. And then once all of these are uploaded to SiteScan, we will process the mission, and that usually it processes in the cloud, so we can close the tab and like do other things. It doesn't have to sit there and run. And depending on the flight size, it usually takes about, I'd say 12 to 15 hours. Sometimes we'll kind of cut them up so that it's a little bit faster, but it usually just runs overnight, and by the next day it's good to go. So after it's done processing, so this was our athletics district. This was from our leaf off that we took in December. It will usually have a pretty decent file size. This was one of the smaller of the flights at 14.5 gigs. I think our West Campus one was about 19. But sometimes we'll download them as individual flights. So athletics was 2 flights it was one whole flight that we had planned out, but we had to fly it in 2 because it's about a 45-minute flight, so we had to change the batteries midway through. And that was an especially cold day, I remember, because we had to, the week that we chose to fly, we had to rearrange some of the flights due to weather. December is not very forgiving in Ohio. So yeah, after it processes, you'll get an email that says, hey, your flight is processed. And then you can merge them together in SiteScan if you want, or you can just download it as a separate mission. And then you'll always download the True Ortho TIFF, and then you'll just put that on whatever file share you have on your computer, and then you'll take it into ArcGIS Pro.
Yeah. I would like to add one little thing while we're here, actually, Audrey, because this is a great example image that you have with how 315 is a major highway on the left side there, and even though it's in the flight imagery, that's due to the field of view of the camera, and we actually do not fly over that. It's just as the fixed wing is flying, it has that side lap to really get across the highway so that we can still accomplish what we want without really crossing these major roadways. But that was a big delineator on half of the images on the left are going to have 315 and half the images on the right are going to have 315, depending on the flight plan you have. And no sporting events happening during these, no major crowds underneath. So.
Yep. The weekend that we flew campus was actually the Tennessee OSU game. And so we had to avoid being on campus during the weekend and like the Friday because they were preparing for the game. So we flew like Thursday and then Monday so that it was a little bit less full of people. So after everything is done processing in SciScan, we take it to ArcGIS Pro, and then I do a lot of cleanup because I'm not sure if you can go back to the last slide. You can kind of see the kind of really jagged edges at the top and at the bottom of the TIFF. That's just where it cuts off from the processing. So we don't really want that to show. And then it also has a lot of just edges around the property that we don't own, and we don't want to show that because it's not our property. You can go back down. So I will take a Scratch Geo database and just create mask layers for each of the flights that we have. So this is typically showing pretty much all of the areas on campus that we don't own or has like a jagged edge, or in areas that are overlapping with other flights. So it doesn't really show it very well in this picture, but between West Campus and Carmenton and Waterman, there's a green bar that's kind of shown. Those flights overlap. So when I was looking at it, it was kind of hard to tell which one was better. So you just kind of have to pick and choose basically when you're creating it. And then you just add it to the mask for each layer, each raster layer. And it will clip the raster to allow for a better image when it's going through online.
Okay, so now we have taken the flights, flown them, talked about the obstacles there. We've talked about the actual the processing of the imagery, and then the preparation of the individual TIFFs and putting them all together in a pro project. So how do we actually use the stuff? There's some examples on this next slide, but I remember there being some questions in the Discord not too long ago about making a raster a cache. So basically what we do is once the project has been prepared, I go to that same ArcGIS Pro project, I open it, and then I use a geoprocessing tool called the Manage Tile Cache GP tool. I make a single layer just to test and make sure that everything looks good at whatever specified resolution I arbitrarily pick for the one test. And then if everything comes out right and it looks good, then I run the cache on the layer, every layer in the map. So you can, instead of calling out individual layers, you can specify the map in this geoprocessing tool, and then it's going to just run everything that's in the map as part of that one cache. I mean, it's a very what you see is what you get tool. So I do this to alleviate demand on our ArcGIS REST server because you could, in theory, just serve out. You could say share this map as a web service, a web map service, and then you can say cache on the server, and it would run it. It would be okay, but I feel like it's a little bit more controlled if we're doing it locally, and I can see some testing before we send it all out to cache. It might not work at larger scale, but for 3,000 acres of TIFF, it's not that ridiculous. So we cache it locally, and we make sure that it has an exact file naming structure, and then we take that cache and move it over to the REST server directory, and then say, okay, now let's share a web map service, but use the existing cache that's already located on the REST server. So this is what that really looks like. There is, on this bottom right image, that is we have a REST service for this particular flight. It's in the REST directory imagery, and then the map of the project is called imagery_OSU Columbus Leaf on 2024. And then there is a subfolder called the layer name, and then all of the contents of the cache. If you go into the all layers, you're going to see each level of the raster cache. And then when you share from ArcGIS Pro, it finds this exact directory, it sees all the contents, and it says, there's a raster cache there, you're all set. So I just make sure that my map is named imagery, or sorry, I name the map what the layer is in the REST service, OSU Columbus Leaf on 2024. And then I just double check that this all works. And if it didn't work, then it would just say there's no cache directory. And then you go and check your naming conventions, and then you're fine. You just double check that the folder structure and the naming structure works for the service that you're creating. Okay. So what we do with the REST services, after we published individual ones for each of our flights, we've started to have this unwieldy sort of set of data. So we could just have a map per service, and we do for certain applications. But for the sake of a most recent imagery, a lot of our end users just want, what's the latest thing you've got? And this is where we just put one map in an item in ArcGIS Online or Enterprise, doesn't matter. You make one map, and then every time you make a service, you add it to that map. And if you have flown the same area, remove the old. But this means that we have individual caches for our individual campuses and for different parts of the state without really having to cache too much and really have this compartmentalized workflow. I was a little bit worried about performance at first, but it ended up not being an issue. Once we actually saw that our services were performant and the map was still performant. So we actually have a couple different areas where we didn't get the full flight, so we still left this cache in because we have, part of this part of the state, but we don't have this part of the state. So everything seems to be pretty solid. And then it's one single point of, Audrey has gone and collected and processed imagery. Now it's my turn to take on the service and then go to this map and then put in one service into the map. And then it disseminates to all of our Experience Builder applications and all of our ArcGIS Pro base maps and everything, just because it's one map. I'm not trying to add a new map to all these different endpoints. It's already been referenced. I've already done the work one time. So that's the ArcGIS workflow. We use an Esri product site scan. We use ArcGIS Pro. We use ArcGIS Server and send it out to a map. Before we get into some more practical advice, maybe do we want to stop for just a quick second and see if there's anything about that there are questions about? All right, cool. So this is pretty much us wrapping up here. We have some lessons learned that if you're looking into getting new drones, or if you've already had them and you're looking for additional tools in your toolkit or something like that, we have some procurement considerations that once upon a time we've learned from. So I really like this one, but I have a tendency whenever I'm trying to scope out or spec out a PC or something that, it's just a little bit more to get this thing and get this slightly better performance on this machine. There is a tendency to do that with drones too, where it's, we want a drone that can do this, this, and this, but then you start looking and you realize for just a little bit more, you can get slightly better resolution. And then you end up spending potentially way more money, or getting way out of scope and not really remembering that this is a drone for this use case. And then you end up with this sort of jack of all trades, master of none equipment that might end up hurting you in the long run. So start cheap, and like very cheap. Sub 1,000 is very doable for some of this caching, and small, like 20-acre workflows. And then you can go from sub $1,000 equipment to $15,000, and then I mean, if there's enough buy-in and workflow improvement and efficiency for your team, you could end up getting something like the Wingtro, which is somewhere, I'm not exactly sure what it would be marketed at right now, but estimating somewhere around like 40-ish thousand is probably a little bit of an overestimate. These are like pretty conservative costs. And one thing to really consider is what is a valuable acre per day collection for you. If you're considering drones for the sake of mapping, but you are an entire county, and you want all of your imagery collected by a drone, I don't know if that's going to really be a suitable use case, but you never know. So if you're a small municipality in terms of total acreage or something, it might be a little bit more cost effective to get everything. But there's a lot of better imagery sources out there, I'd assume, for something like entire county or half a state or something. So really think about your total acres per flight and what is actually reasonable to accomplish. Our largest drone that we have can only do 20 acres per flight, and the return on the investment for that data would be like months of flights in order to actually get the entire Columbus campus from setup to packing up and moving. It would take forever. So you have to really consider your batteries and time, your time. So another big concern for us and for many might be the lack of clarity around the regulations. Be very careful about your equipment and just talk to your local procurement about that. It varies from place to place, and each state, each department is going to probably have a different answer to what you're allowed to and not allowed to actually purchase. There is a list of blue UAS from the FAA that is sort of like verified that you are allowed to purchase. There are not that many in terms of mapping drones, but they are there. So they're just a little bit more expensive. But yeah, really consider that when you're looking at the equipment. So operational lessons learned. One of the very first times that Audrey and I actually flew together was in the middle of winter, and I left the batteries in the car overnight. Terrible idea. We had to wait for about an hour for the batteries to warm up in the car, just with air conditioning and the car heating, and it was just miserable. So really think about where you store your equipment, not just in perpetuity, but day of is really crucial. And how are you going to move this stuff is a big one. Small drones, the sub $1,000, sub $5,000 price mark, even the Wingtro can be moved in one mid-size SUV, but really consider what kind of space you have for your equipment and where it's going to be stored. That's sometimes an afterthought, and then you don't know where to put stuff. So that's almost gotten us before. We do try to be stricter than anybody is going to be on us for our policies. So everything that we ever do on the Columbus campus, there's always 2 people for, whether it's 2 full-time staff or a staff and an intern. But we really have to be very, very aware of what the general safety is with the heavy foot traffic, and making sure that nobody bumps into us while we're looking up at the sky like weirdos. And there's always something moving. So you got to be very aware and prepare for the unpreparable. And like Audrey mentioned before, the police, the form is so important for the sake of letting the police know before you do anything so that they have answers before they come ask you for answers about what you're actually doing. Usually there's some stigma about what a drone is actually doing and privacy concerns, and everybody's going to have a different type of concern for what you're trying to accomplish. So being able to put an advance notice out that says this is a member of this organization doing this thing. There's some open public tools for this as well. That there's like Airspace Link, which is sort of an Esri, I believe they're an Esri partner. I'm not exactly sure, but they do a sort of like a community-driven data approach to. I'm going to be flying over here. I want to ask for approval from the FAA, but also you can see where other people have requested flights, and say, oh, there's a flight operation over there today. Maybe I should be on the lookout for somebody else's drone while I'm out there doing my thing. All right, that is everything we've got. We've got a few extra minutes here, so any comments, questions, or concerns?
Well, I just want to thank you guys for coming in and sharing your knowledge. I think, oh, I got a question. Can you touch on DJI? Can we use it? Should we?
So that actually was, yeah, so this is in reference to the lack of certainty in regulations. We've been told both yes and no over the past several years. So it's hard to say. I think that there are certain states that have banned the use of that equipment from that specific vendor. Some cite ethical concerns, some cite security concerns. It really just comes down to whoever is, what's your risk factor? Are you willing to take the risk that any day something could change and the equipment might not be procurable? I think that we have a DJI Matrice, and it's definitely a risk if some of the equipment breaks, or say the charger breaks, and if suddenly we're not able to get a new charger because there's been an economic ban on this equipment, we have no way to charge it, and now it's a big paperweight. They are some of the best commercial drones on the market, and they are some of the cheapest. So it's possible, but this is where I would say you should definitely work with your organization and the finance people there to really make sure that that's okay. And then if they say yes, do it. They're the only ones that would tell you no, until somebody higher than them does.
So for your question about the helicopter, so we use a couple of apps called Flight Radar and another one that I can't remember the name of. But no, our drones don't really say anything if there's anything nearby, like a helicopter. So we keep an eye on visually or through the apps. And then if we see one that is coming towards, specifically like the med center, when we're flying med center, we're very aware of what's going on because we're going right over the helipad and we need to be able to land because they have right of way. So this past winter when we were flying, we actually had 3 helicopters come, 2 or 3 come to the med center while we were there. And we just had returned to home, and then it flew right back, and then we just sat there and waited around to see like how long they were going to be there. Do we just need to pack up and come back another day, come back later? Usually it's fine. If you just hit return to home, especially if you can see the drone, it will usually come back just fine. I have not had any problems with the return to home. Or for the Wingtra specifically, you can have it hover and it will kind of just donut around until you say continue the flight, and then it will be fine.
And to the cost for the Wingtra, The Wingtra Gen 2 is our drone that we currently have from them. I don't know what the commercial pricing is because there is varying costs, whether it's sometimes there's educational discounts for products, sometimes there's not. But I'm fairly certain that you can get an entire Wingtra system with peripherals for sub 40,000 is my estimate, but I'm not in tune with that cost. And if you're interested, they have tons of information on their website about it, and they also have really good examples of the data as well. Yeah, we use it. This is not a sales pitch for their drone. It's just happens to be the one that we use the most, and it's very reliable. And it is made in another country, but it is, I believe, on the Blue UAS list, but that list does change sometimes.
It is. It's through Switzerland, so they put it on there for now.
Awesome. Yeah, so yeah, definitely some helicopters also do not have some helicopters do not have their transponders on. So we do, that's why it is our policy internally that we have at least 2 people out in the field at all times, so that if we're on the Columbus campus, because it is the highest helicopter trafficked area, and we have someone that is there that can just use their eyes and ears more, but also use these third-party apps to look for transponder information. Thankfully, over years of doing this, we know the standard helicopters that we'll see, mostly life flight or police helicopters, and we know that there are certain weeks to avoid, like the Ohio Fair has an extra helicopter traffic, so we have to avoid that week in particular due to just more uncertainty. But we're always on guard because there are single engine prop planes that come through most of the state, and just they can do a lot, and you just have to be aware of that. So really, yeah, at all times head on a swivel for any aircraft of any size or type. That's a great question.
Yeah, I've never
from
dealt
Kelly.
with birds of prey. I know that there was at one point some hawks or eagles, I can't remember exactly. And I think I don't remember if there was anything that we had to avoid, but I know that there were a couple of flights where Aaron, the other pilot that I work with, I think he actually flew a drone up to like monitor them. So
yeah, so inspecting the nests from afar and like trying to zoom on the imagery is one of those use cases. But the bigger the drone and the louder it is, the more likely they are to avoid it. We try to fly at the flight ceiling for us, so that we're usually pretty deconflicted with anything that's just hanging out near the ground and having a lazy meandery day, like a goose, or the hawks are definitely a little bit scary, and we do avoid them. But the Wingtra it tends to scare them away, and we haven't had any direct confrontations. I would be a little bit worried for like our Autel Evo Max or something small. And the price point at around 20K, that sounds very reasonable. I'm wondering if that, when I said 40,000, I think that includes like peripherals and like extra batteries, base station, stuff like that you might want to consider. And there's different sensor types. There's a ton of different sensor types. So yeah, it's get a quote and see what you can do. But really, just a standard RGB camera is going to be fine there, and it's really straightforward to use. And yeah. Yeah, and we try to avoid all wildlife. Yeah, and great advice on the fireproof bag for storing batteries. That's huge. We do. Do you have anything else, Audrey? Or any other questions that I missed?
I answered some in the chat, but I'll read them out loud for the recording. So Kelly asked, do you ever file beyond visual line of sight waiver requests? And I said that we don't usually, because we usually separate multiple flights out so that it doesn't go out of line of sight. But when we are using the Wingtra, we get warnings from the controller that says the drone has dropped connection. And if it has dropped connection for over a minute, it will automatically return to home. And then there was another question about interest in flying infrared or multispectral. We have recently gotten some interest in flying infrared, especially over the summer. From some building managers on campus, they want to get some infrared for roofing, for leak checks, and also some building envelope checks, various stuff like that. And then we've also seen how some of the utility people on campus have used infrared to find leaks that are obviously not visually noticeable on the ground. So they've also used infrared to find utility areas that they didn't know they had, because campus is really old, so not all of the utilities are always mapped out accurately.
Yeah, and we do have a multispectral sensor that we rarely do use on the Wingtra, but it does exist. We've also seen some test cases there for like invasive species detection. If you know that you're looking for a specific species and it blooms at a specific time before other things, early spring, you might be able to really get that to pop before the full the full tree canopy is grown for some of the lower brush. But yeah, in very little, but some use cases so far.
Yeah, and I also want to mention, like, we are more of the like administration side of OSU, so we don't do a lot of like the research academic drone flights that do come through. A lot of the Center for Aviation Studies, they do a lot of those research-based flights with professors or just classes in general. So they may have more use for the multispectral and hyperspectral flights.
There is a ton of ag flights in that. So the College of Food and Ag, they have a ton of hyperspectral related research project flights throughout the state, mostly on crop fields. So we don't tend to want that data. Some of them are on properties that aren't OSU owned, and we only really care for OSU owned assets. SiteScan can do RTK and PPK. The Wingtra itself is the limitation on that, as it is PPK. But we do process SiteScan imagery with the Matrice and the Autel, both of which are RTK. I might have misspoke there. The Matrice and the Autel are PPK. Cool. All right.
Well, yeah, thank you so much, guys. It's awesome presentation. Great, going over kind of the general drone stuff and some really cool use cases for us. Obviously, really great interaction from the members here. I think this is the most interaction we've gotten from one of our webinars, so it's really good to see. Just really, again, thank you guys for coming. Really awesome stuff. I wanted to give one last shout out to our sponsor, MapTal GIS Services. And again, this will all be up on YouTube here very shortly as well. So if you missed something or want to go back or want to share it with other people that couldn't make it today, we'd appreciate it if you do that. So thanks again, guys. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.